5:28 a.m. A house goes dark, then a light turns on. Inside, a man is getting dressed for his morning run. He does this every day. Same time, same route. He doesn't know an arrest team is 2 minutes away. He doesn't know the FBI has been watching him for 22 days. He doesn't know one of his own sources broke protocol weeks ago and made a call from a payphone that started all of this. He opens the door in his running clothes. He sees the badge. He says nothing. To understand why federal agents were standing on that porch, you have to go back 11 weeks, back to a man who wasn't supposed to matter at all. He was an informant, recruited the normal way, vetted for months before the FBI trusted him enough to bring him on. He had contacts inside Iranian communities, business ties, small connections that stretched back into Iran itself. Nothing special, just useful. For 11 weeks, he reported. His information checked out. His handlers were satisfied. Nobody thought twice about him. Then, on a Tuesday morning, he broke the rules. He didn't call his handler's line. He didn't send a message through the normal system. He walked to a payphone 2 miles from his home. A payphone he had never used before. Not once, in 11 weeks. That alone should have been a warning sign. When his handler picked up, the man didn't sound scared. He sounded certain. They know my name. Not, I think. Not, maybe. He knew. He said a man from his own community had approached him. Someone he barely noticed before. Someone who was always just there. Background noise. That man knew his name. He knew where the FBI had met him last time. He knew the license plate of the car that dropped him off. Then the man said 6 words. Tell your handlers that Tehran knows, and walked away. The informant didn't wait. He didn't go home and think about it. He found a payphone and made the call within the hour. His handler moved fast, reported it up the chain immediately. But somewhere above him, something broke. The report sat for 18 hours before anyone with real authority saw it. 18 hours. In an investigation like this, that's not a delay. That's a decision. And by the time the FBI understood what that decision meant, it would become just one item on a list of 37. 18 hours. That number would matter later. But that morning, all anyone knew was this. A registered source had been approached by someone connected to Iranian intelligence. That doesn't happen by accident. To find a source's identity, a meeting location, and a vehicle used by an FBI handler, someone has to know things that aren't supposed to leave the building. So the first question wasn't who talked, it was how. An analyst pulled the access logs. Every person who had opened that source's file in the past 11 weeks. 7 names came up. 4 were routine. The handler, checking in. Expected. 1 was a supervisor approving the registration. Also expected. 1 was tech support, fixing a database error. Fine. The 7th access didn't belong to any of them. It belonged to the regional director. 20 years with the Bureau. The man who ran counterintelligence across 4 states. The man responsible for protecting sources exactly like this one. On its own, that access meant nothing. Directors review files. That's the job. But the analyst didn't stop there. She pulled the access logs for every source the regional director had ever supervised. 6 of them. Sources whose relationships had ended over the years. Some compromised. Some who just stopped reporting. 1 who died overseas under circumstances nobody had questioned. She checked when he accessed each file. Then she checked when each relationship ended. Every single time, the pattern was the same. He opened the file. Within days, sometimes a week, sometimes 3, that source's relationship ended. 6 sources, 6 accesses, 6 endings. The odds of that being random were close to 0. At 4:17 p.m., she picked up the phone and escalated it straight to the top. By 6 that evening, a new investigation existed. It had a name nobody outside 8 people would ever hear. Burned Bridge. The regional director had no idea it existed. His access still worked. His schedule didn't change. His calendar looked exactly the same as it had the day before. He had no idea that by nightfall, A surveillance team would already be watching his house. Surveilling a counterintelligence official isn't like watching an ordinary suspect. He knew what surveillance looked like. He'd trained people to spot it. He knew how teams positioned themselves, how long a car could sit on a street before it looked wrong, what a foottail felt like from behind. So the team watching him couldn't look like a team at all. More people, more distance, rotating coverage that never repeated a pattern twice. For days, nothing happened. He went to work. He went home. He lived exactly the life a 20-year veteran was supposed to live. Then, on day 11, something changed. He parked his car on the 3rd level of a parking garage. Then he walked down to the 2nd level using the stairs. That's not a shortcut. That's a counter-surveillance move. A way to check if anyone's following you. He met a man there. 7 minutes. No visible exchange of anything. Both of them stood at an angle that blocked any camera from seeing what passed between their hands, if anything did. Then they left in different directions. Within 48 hours, investigators had a name for the second man. American citizen. Lebanese background. No criminal record. Worked in commercial real estate. On paper, his bank records didn't match his job. His passport showed 3 trips to the Gulf in the last year and a half. Each one, 4 to 7 days. Each one, unexplained. He wasn't just a contact. He was a cutout. A middleman built to keep the regional director's hands clean of direct contact with Iranian intelligence. And now the FBI had 2 targets instead of 1. 14 days in, they had a warrant to monitor his devices. 3 days after that, they found something. An encrypted message. Language built to look like nothing. But the pattern matched 2 prior IRGC operations the NSA had already studied. It wasn't nothing. It was a meeting, scheduled 4 days out. The investigation finally had what it needed. A date. A window. A chance to catch them both in the act. By now, one question mattered more than any other. Who was he, really? Not the 20-year veteran. Not the man who built a career catching spies. The other one. The one hiding underneath. Investigators would find the answer had been sitting there for 6 years, waiting to be noticed. 6 years of access. 6 years of trust. 6 years nobody looked twice. Until a man walked to a payphone and refused to stay quiet. 6 years earlier, none of this existed. Just a man on a work trip. A law enforcement conference in Bahrain. Multilateral cooperation. The kind of trip that happens every year. Logged and forgotten. His meetings at the conference were documented. Standard stuff. One dinner wasn't. A man introduced himself as a business consultant. Regional security interests, he said. Friendly. Easy to talk to. The kind of person who asks good questions and listens well. That man was IRGC, Iran's Quds force. Working undercover, with no diplomatic protection to hide behind. Recruitment doesn't happen in one conversation. It happens in small steps, spread out over months. A second meeting, 6 months later, in a different city. Then a third. Nothing framed as espionage. Just professional exchange. The kind of thing people in his line of work did all the time, or told themselves they did. The first thing he gave up was small, almost forgettable. By the time he understood what he was actually doing, he'd already done enough that there was no clean way out. The Quds force officer running him understood that better than he did. The question was never if he'd cooperate again, it was how much. Over 6 years he was paid roughly $1.7 million, not handed to him in cash. Structured through real estate deals in Turkey. Funneled through a consulting company in Dubai that existed only on paper. No clients, no real work. Just a name and a bank account. He had no background in international finance. He didn't need one. Iranian intelligence built the entire system for him. All he had to do was keep showing up to work every day. And keep being trusted. For 6 years he was. Money was the easy part to measure. What he gave up was worse. He didn't just hand over names. He handed over the entire blueprint of how the FBI catches Iranian spies. How sources are assessed. What questions get asked during vetting. What answers raise a red flag. And which ones don't. That means Iranian intelligence could coach someone through the process, teach them exactly what to say to get approved as a trusted FBI source. He handed over the identities of FBI handlers working Iranian cases, their coverage areas, their rotation schedules. He handed over internal reports, assessments of people the FBI suspected might be working for Iran, but didn't yet have enough evidence to act on. In other words, he gave them a map: who was being watched, who was being recruited, who almost got caught. 6 sources burned, 1 dead. 11 agents exposed for years without knowing it, and for 6 years, the man responsible for protecting all of it was the one selling it away. 22 days. That's how long the surveillance operation ran before it had enough to move. Every day carried risk. He was trained to notice exactly the kind of coverage now following him. The team adjusted for that. More personnel than a normal operation would use. Wider spacing. No repeated patterns. No predictable vehicles. No faces that showed up twice. For the first 10 days, he lived like nothing was wrong. Work. Home. Routine. Then came the parking garage. 3rd level to 2nd level. On foot, using the stairs. A move meant to catch a tail. It didn't catch this one. 7 minutes with the man later identified as his cutout. No visible exchange. Careful positioning to block any clear view. Then they left separately. Investigators had eyes on both men now. The cutout's financial pattern didn't make sense for his job. Trips to the Gulf that lasted just long enough to meet someone, not long enough to look like a vacation. By day 14, his devices were under surveillance too. By day 17, an intercepted message confirmed what everyone suspected. A transfer, a time, a meeting, 4 days out. The investigation had been building toward this moment for 3 weeks. Now it had an actual date on a calendar. A judge would need to sign off. Fast. And once she did, there would be no more waiting. Just a countdown. 11:40 p.m. on a Sunday night. A federal judge sat with a stack of paperwork most judges never see in a career. Wiretap transcripts, surveillance logs, financial records stretching back 6 years. She would later describe it as one of the most thoroughly documented espionage cases ever brought to her for signature. She read every page. At 12:22 a.m., she signed it. The warrant was live. The clock started. Arrest time, 6 a.m., Monday. 2 teams, 2 locations, 1 signal. But the planning wasn't finished yet, because the man they were arresting wasn't a normal target. He jogged the same route almost every morning. Same window, 5:45 to 6:15. If they waited for him to leave the house, they'd be chasing a 20-year counterintelligence veteran through streets he'd run 1,000 times. That wasn't a risk worth taking. So the plan changed. Contact before the run. 5:30 a.m. Before his morning even started. Everyone in position by 5:15. Radios silent. 2 teams, synced to the same countdown. Then, at 5:28 a.m., 2 minutes before the signal, a light came on inside the house. He was already awake. Earlier than his pattern. Earlier than any morning surveillance had logged in 22 days. For 30 seconds, nobody moved. Was he leaving early? Had something spooked him? Did he somehow know? The team lead made a call. 30 seconds of silence. Then the order. Go. At 5:30 a.m., agents reached the door. He opened it already dressed to run. 20 minutes ahead of schedule. For a run that would never happen. He looked at the badge. He looked at the warrant. He looked at the agent standing closest to him. He said nothing. No shock. No argument. No questions. He stepped back from the doorway to let them in and placed his hands at his sides, palms open, fingers loose, no tension in his shoulders. Agents who've made hundreds of arrests know what panic looks like. This wasn't panic. This was someone who had rehearsed this exact moment in his head, maybe for weeks, maybe longer. He didn't speak in the car. He didn't speak during booking. Before a single question was asked, he said 4 words. I want a lawyer. 2 counties away, his cutout wasn't nearly as composed. He was still asleep when the door came open. Confused, disoriented. slower to understand what was happening to him, even as it was happening. Two men, same morning, same charges waiting for both of them. One had clearly been expecting this. The other hadn't seen it coming at all. And that difference, who saw it coming and who didn't, would end up mattering more than anyone realized in the days that followed. The first 48 hours weren't about punishment. They were about triage. Every file the regional director had ever touched needed to be checked. Every name, every source, every relationship that had ever crossed his desk in 6 years. The man who made the payphone call came first. He was found, protected, and relocated before the sun set on the day of the arrest. He's safe now, debriefed, resettled, alive because he trusted a feeling he couldn't fully explain at the time. The others didn't get that kind of urgency, because for years, nobody knew they needed it. 2 sources had already been formally marked as compromised, long before this investigation ever started. When that happens, the standard response is simple: cut contact, protect the source, move on. Except the protocol that was supposed to protect them had been shaped, quietly, by the very man who'd sold them out. Follow-up that should have happened never did. Both were eventually found. Both were still alive. Both had spent years not knowing if Iranian intelligence still had their names sitting in a file somewhere, waiting. 2 more sources had simply gone quiet years earlier. No explanation. No red flags at the time. When investigators finally sat down with them, both gave almost identical answers. Someone from inside their own community had approached them, told them the FBI already knew what they were doing, said it wasn't safe to continue. They assumed it was a warning from someone protecting them. It wasn't. It was Iranian intelligence, using stolen information to shut down FBI access, without ever revealing that the access had been stolen in the first place. A quiet kill. No violence. No confrontation. Just fear, pointed in exactly the right direction. Then there was the 6th, the one who died in another country. Ruled natural causes at the time. No investigation. No second look. Case closed. Until now. A request went out to reopen it. Investigators cited new evidence. Evidence that didn't exist before this arrest, because the connection didn't exist before this arrest. That case is still open. Nobody involved has said, publicly or otherwise, what they expect the new investigation to find. But the fact that it was reopened at all tells you the first ruling wasn't as certain as everyone once believed. It took 8 weeks to measure what 6 years of access had actually cost. 14 confidential sources. Compromised, or close enough that the difference no longer mattered. 11 FBI agents whose identities, assignments, and daily routines had been sitting inside Iranian intelligence files for up to 4 years without their knowledge. 9 people who had approached the FBI hoping to become informants, coached without ever realizing it, on exactly what to say to pass as trustworthy. 6 prior sources. Their relationships ended one by one through a system built to look like ordinary disengagement. 1 source, dead. A case reopened. An answer still pending. $1.7 million. The total price tag on 6 years of access, funneled through real estate deals and a consulting firm that never did a single day of real business. 20 years of service. 6 years of betrayal running underneath it, unnoticed. 18 hours it took someone above him to forward a warning that should have taken minutes to move. 37 decisions, in total, that investigators would eventually trace back through the wreckage. Some small, some enormous, all of them now impossible to separate from the 6 years they protected. He was charged with espionage, conspiracy to commit espionage, obstruction of justice, tied directly to that 18-hour delay, and one more charge, sealed. Nobody outside the case has seen what it says, but prosecutors don't add a sealed charge to an indictment like this without clearing an extremely high legal bar first. They cleared it, which means, somewhere in that sealed filing, is an accusation connecting his 6 years of transmissions to the death of a source who was never supposed to be more than a statistic. He was denied bail. His attorney argued 20 years of federal service and no criminal history. The motion was denied in 3 sentences. His cutout took a plea deal, sealed as well. His cooperation reportedly moved the investigation faster than anyone expected, though how much faster, and toward what, hasn't been made public. The Quds Force officer who recruited him 6 years earlier, over a quiet dinner in Bahrain, has never sat in an American courtroom. He wasn't operating under diplomatic cover, which should have made him easier to reach. It hasn't. Legal requests move through countries that don't answer on the FBI's timeline. Sometimes they don't answer at all. His current status has not been made public. Somewhere, a foreign case file marked "Natural Causes" is being reopened by investigators who won't say what they're looking for. Somewhere, 6 people are still living with the knowledge that Iranian intelligence once knew exactly who they were. And somewhere, a man who once stood alone at a payphone 2 miles from his own home still has no idea how far his one phone call actually reached. He just knew something felt wrong. He made a call anyway. That was enough to end 6 years. It might not be enough to end everything that's still unfinished.